Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first quarterly meeting of the Palmetto Vision Alliance in 2024. We are delighted that you all are here and with us this morning, and we're excited for our guests to kick us off at the beginning of our program. We are grateful for the expertise of our members, and that expertise is going to be on shining display as one of our leading members, Able South Carolina, and their team will be talking to us about accessible marketing and communications, which is something that we all talk an awful lot about in ways that we can improve and strengthen and grow in. So we're deeply grateful to Mary Reaves, the Director of Community Access, and Sarah Massengale, the Community Access Specialist, who will be leading our presentation today. Sarah also was instrumental in helping conduct the accessibility audit of the new Palmetto Vision Alliance website as well. So we're grateful for the expertise of our members and appreciate Able South Carolina leading us this morning. So Mary and Sarah, the floor is yours. Welcome and thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Daniel, for that introduction. Sarah and I are so happy to be here and have an opportunity to speak with you. I know we have a lot of content to cover, so we're going to hop right in, turn it over to Sarah.
All right. Thank you, Mary. So give me just a moment. Okay, so just a couple of housekeeping things. As Daniel mentioned, I am Sarah Massengale. I'm Community Access Specialist with Able. I do a lot of the digital accessibility initiatives at Able, including the audits and facilitating trainings like this one. Just a couple of housekeeping things. So one of the things that I ask is that we try to minimize the interactions in the chat as much as possible, just because I am totally blind and using a screen reader as we present, and that screen reader will kind of go off in my ears if we use the chat and interrupt me looking at the presentation. So I ask that we try to minimize that. Feel free to ask questions during presentation time. I tend to kind of run things very informally, and it's always a good practice, I think, to talk about things while we're thinking about them. And then last thing, so a lot of times we get feedback from the visual body language that a person is giving us. And in this case, that's a little trickier for me. So if you have concerns, if you have thoughts, if you have feedback, if something is maybe going too fast, check in with us. Let us know where you are as we go through the presentation so that we can make sure you're getting the most information that you can out of this, because we will be going very quickly. All right, I will pass it back over to Mary to just tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, I'm not going to read this whole slide to you, but this is our mission and vision. And then I think the most important thing that we like to share with folks is that we are a disability-led organization. We're a team of about, we bring on someone new, I feel like almost every week, but we're a little over 60, a team of a little over 60 between here and our Greenville office, and 85% of our staff are people with disabilities. So this isn't something we just learned. It's a lived experience. And our goal is really that we establish South Carolina as a national model of equity and inclusion for all people with disabilities. And one of the ways that we do that is by getting to talk to groups who are out there doing the work as well. So we're happy that you're joining us in this opportunity. Our training objectives today, we really want you to understand why accessibility and communication is important, figuring out how to be respectful with the language, speaking to people with disabilities or about disability issues, recognize some of the most common assistive technology, or AT, that we might use in digital spaces, figuring out how to implement some of the real basic considerations, alt text, image descriptions, and giving you some key accessibility features for your social media content, which is, you know, we're all out there using social media. So that's what we hope that you will take away today. All right, Sarah, tell them why accessibility.
All right, so why are we talking about this? Why does accessibility matter? Well, because 1 in 4 people in South Carolina have a disability. And excuse me, just a second, technical glitch here. There we go. And then, of course, disability is the most common minority that intersects through a variety of things. It intersects through race and gender and orientation, any number of things. Disability affects everyone. And also because implementing accessibility features doesn't just help people with disabilities, it helps people without disabilities as well. So when we do the implementation of accessibility features correctly, we are really benefiting everyone.
I think a lot of times we think of accessibility as just, is there a ramp? Is there an elevator? Can we get into a space? And one of the best parts about this presentation that Sarah and I get to do is really talking about all the other ways in which accessibility matters and impacts folks. So why accessibility? Well, the first thing that we want to share with you is that it's the law. There are a number of laws that are around accessibility, and that's sections 508 and 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which many of you might have heard of, ADA. There's also the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, IDEA, and then the Plain Writing Act. So there are a number of laws that really focus on why accessibility and how we do it. So real quick, we're not going to deep dive too much into these laws. The Rehab Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability, and it is related to federal agencies. Section 504 specifically protects children and adults from exclusion within schools, workforces, the broader community. 508 relates specifically to the federal government and agencies that use technology. And so we will refer a lot to 508 compliance. You probably have heard about that when Sarah is looking, for example, when she looked at the website, she's looking for 508 compliance. So that means, does it match up with section 508 of the Rehab Act? Next, the Americans with Disabilities Act, originally passed in 1990, has been amended a number of times. I need to keep forgetting to add that in that slide there. It prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in a number of ways: employment, transportation, public accommodations, communications, and access to state and local government programs and services. It has a number of titles. We typically, Title I, employment, Title II relates to those who receive state or federal funding. Title III is public entities, nonprofits, anything open to the public, grocery store, movie theater. And so that's, we typically are focusing on our team, Title II and Title III entities, to make sure that they understand how to maintain compliance with the ADA and make sure that accessibility on all fronts is there. So that was our quick little foray into the law. Sarah, do you want to talk about what digital accessibility is?
Sure. And I'm going to piggyback on the laws for just a second, because at a couple points during the presentation, you will hear me mention the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or I will likely shorten it to WCAG or WCAG. This is sort of the teeth of the ADA when it comes to digital accessibility. So when I audit a website, for example, I am looking at 508 compliance, absolutely, but I am also looking for compliance with WCAG, which has hundreds of individual standards that I'm assessing as I go through a website. So digital accessibility, you hear this term a lot. What does it mean? It is all of the considerations that when you put them together in digital spaces, ensure that people with and without disabilities can fully access that digital content. All right. So let's talk about some basics of digital accessibility. Who is affected by digital accessibility? Give me just a moment. So people with hearing disabilities, both capital D and little d deaf, people with visual disabilities, people with intellectual and cognitive disabilities, even people with motor disabilities in some cases because of things like alternative keyboard layouts. People who use things like speech-to-text software, and then non-disabled people. And I will very briefly touch on this, but we talk about something called search engine optimization. And what that gets into is when we do things like put alt text in our photos, it means that those websites, those web pages will come up higher in your search results, meaning that even people without disabilities will find your web page faster and benefit from the fact that you have implemented digital accessibility features. So let's go to assistive technology. In the blindness community, I'm going to make a quick note right here because y'all are primarily working with people with visual disabilities. This is also often referred to as access technology. The reason being that in the blindness community, our technology is technology that allows full and equitable access, not so much in giving assistance. And so the assistive technology can refer to either high or low tech solutions that allow people with disabilities to fully and equitably participate in basically the spaces around them, whether they be digital, physical, whether it be medical assistive tech, a variety of situations and spaces. All right, so common types of assistive or access tech used for accessing the web and digital spaces. All right, so we talk about, excuse me, just a second. We talk about braille displays, screen magnifiers, screen readers, voice control apps and software. So when I say voice control, things like the voice control on your iPhones, for example, and then speech to text or text to speech. Excuse me just a moment. And then dictation apps and software. Occasionally you see things like a Braille keyboard overlay, and then your more advanced devices, alternative keyboards, eye gaze tracking technology, things that are used primarily in the cases of people with motor disabilities. And then there is a screen reader demo here that you are welcome to refer back to later. This is a lengthier video. I will give you a gentle warning that this is very dry content. But this is a very good, just sort of basic screen reader demo.
And if you aren't sure how a screen reader works, if you've never experienced that, I encourage you to watch that. And we will resend the slides to make sure that this video link is in there. So Daniel, hold those that you have, and we'll send a version with this because I just added this in. But take a look. It's an interesting perspective to understand how a screen reader works and gives us a really good perspective, I think.
The biggest takeaway that I will, yep, no problem. The biggest takeaway that I will give you on how a screen reader works, for those of you that may not be familiar, is that screen reader users often, now there are exceptions to this, but screen reader users often do not use a mouse. We typically exclusively use keyboard navigation. And so the accessibility of web pages and other digital content via keyboard is going to be really important. Okay, so let's talk about plain language. When we talk about plain language, the biggest thing to remember is that we are not, quote unquote, dumbing down content. We are putting content in clear and easy to understand language We're putting content in short sentences that are one thought per sentence. And if we need to use more complex words, we are taking the time to define them in easy, clear language. We're eliminating jargon if we can help it. And we are not using abbreviations and acronyms, particularly without defining them. The way that I simplify this a lot of times is to tell folks, write like you speak. And typically that is a very helpful way to think about plain language. Give me just a second. My screen reader focus has shifted. Okay.
We have some resources for plain language for you if you'd like to learn more about that. That was a law passed in 2012, I believe. And there are a lot of great resources about how to do that.
Yes.
And all right, Sarah, I think we're shifting into language matters.
Yes.
So when we are looking at the disability community, working with folks with disabilities, our language really does matter. How we communicate makes a really big difference. And we all know language shifts, language changes, it's fluid. You know, I have a high schooler, he comes home with a new term and I'm like, I don't know what that means, buddy. Can you tell me what that word means? Language changes. And one of the most important things that we want you to take away is that you follow the language of the folks that you're talking with, most importantly. But there's a couple ways to think about that. We can do person first language or identity first language. Person first does exactly what it says. It puts the person first. So a person with a disability. Identity first is more in line with how the person identifies, and folks might change that. You know, individuals definitely have a preference on how they like to identify. And this is an image from a really great website. And we did put in your resource guide from Disabled in Here. They've got a lot of great resources talking about alt text, image descriptions, and how to make sure that you have images that include people with disabilities in your outreach. So let's talk about some examples of person first. People with disabilities, women who are incarcerated, an individual living with HIV, a person with a substance use disorder. Identity first might be a disabled person, a transgender person, a Black person, Indigenous people, autistic people. And you can see that those identifiers are capitalized, and that matters. Oop, there we go. Things we don't want to do. We don't want to turn an adjective into a noun. We're not grouping people, right? I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. I will say there is one caveat. Some communities, the deaf community, for example, for those who are involved in the deaf community, or predominantly American Sign Language users, it is not viewed as offensive to say the deaf community. But we still wouldn't want to say the deaf people. So just being mindful of that. You will see in this slide, there are some words who have an asterisk in the middle. Those words are those that are frequently viewed as a slur. And I'm not going to say them. You probably know what they are. I'm going to read some of the others, but I'm not going to read those. People with disabilities, not differently abled, not special needs, not handy capable. I think a lot of those words came from our the general non-disabled community to try to find a way to not be offensive, and I think has oftentimes done the opposite. People who are blind, people with low vision, not the blind, visually impaired. People with short stature, not dwarf. People with learning and intellectual disabilities, not stupid, slow, dim, dumb, the R word. People with psychiatric disabilities, not the C word, psycho, insane, idiot. A person with a speech disability, not a speech impairment or a speech impediment. And this image we have here is a young lady who came to this past year's Advocacy Day at our State House. And this is a sign that she made, and I think it just embodies that. People with disabilities have a voice. And one of the things that we can do most impactfully is to listen to that voice. So in your communications, in your content that you're putting out, be mindful of your language and what it's conveying to the larger community, both the disabled community and the non-disabled community, because we have an opportunity to really establish, make folks look to us as the experts there. All right, Sarah, I know we still have a lot to content to cover, and it's 9:23. I went really fast. So we'll move to making your content accessible.
Yes, and we are going to move very, very quickly. So I'm going to move to alt text and image descriptions. So there's a slight difference here. Alt text is considered a very, very short description of the most essential parts of your content. It is typically no more than 2 or 3 sentences. It is coded into the web page in the HTML, or it is added directly into the photo or graphic on social media. Image description is slightly different. It is much longer. It can really go into detail, be a bit more artistic, be a bit more poetic in the description of your image, up to a paragraph typically. And it is in the body copy or in your post on social media. And on our next slide, you will see examples of alt text and image description. I'm not going to read those for the sake of time, but if you want to go back, you will get these slides later. Social media with alt text. And this briefly, bear with me just a moment. All right, so this talks about the fact that Facebook and Instagram do allow for alt text. It, I believe, talks about how to add that. If not, we will make sure that is in your resource guide. Things like Snapchat, TikTok, all of these things do not allow for alt text. So just being mindful of what content you're using on what platforms. All right, and then this next slide tells you briefly how to add your alt text into Microsoft products. And then a slide on some other ways to add alt text in other applications. Accessible audio. So with your audio and video content, there are a couple of things you want to be mindful of. Are you using captions, preferably open, so that they are always visible? Closed is, of course, also acceptable, especially if that is what you have access to. Are you making sure that if you are using AI captioning, you are going back and editing it? Auto caption can be really interesting in the things that it produces. And then in addition to captioning, are you creating a transcript to go along with your audio and video content? Last piece, are you making sure that for any visual only elements on screen, any elements with just music where there is nothing vocalized, that you are employing audio description as you should be? And please know, as a blind person with experience, that I will just tell you, a synthesized voice with audio description is no substitute for a human describer, and will often, at least for me, turn me away from the video content. Okay, so who benefits from captions and transcripts? People who are deaf, people who are hard of hearing, people who have difficulties with audio processing, folks who just are watching your content without the sound on. That is a thing that happens. We've also seen that we talked about search engine optimization earlier. We have seen that adding captions also brings up where your video and audio content are in the search results. Audio and visual description, we talked about some of this, people who are blind, people who are low vision, people who, for a number of reasons, may need image descriptions with photos and graphics, will also potentially benefit from audio and visual description. Okay, accessible documents. Give me just a moment. All right, we're going to very briefly touch on a couple of things. So when you're organizing your documents, being sure that you are using headings correctly. You only have one heading level 1 in the entire document, that is your title. And then on the headings and links slide, there are explanations of how to use your headings after that and how to add them correctly in particularly Microsoft products. Tables. Being mindful that your table has a header row and that you are telling Word to recognize it as a header row, because if you do not have that, the screen reader in particular will not know how to correlate your data. All right, Mary, I'm going to turn it to you for quickly colors and fonts.
Okay, I have a quick example here of colors and fonts that work and don't. The big takeaway from this is, again, when we're establishing content, not only does 508 give us 508 compliance and the WCAG standards give us ideas of how to do that, but there are a number of ways that we need to do that. Font and contrast is one. Basically, avoid fonts that have feet, right? So we don't want serif fonts, we want sans serif fonts. And we want to make sure that we can see our font, our typeface on the color. And so this is a really good visual example of what works and what doesn't work. And we have a resource in the end for you of a place where you can go and check your color content. It's pretty easy to do. Definitely recommend that you do that on images, anytime you have font, and when you're using, anything other than white or black. Take a look at that.
And
Sarah, you go ahead.
Yep. And then our next 2 slides, one shows you that in Microsoft products, you have an accessibility checker and talks to you about how to use that. And then your last slide is a very brief discussion of PDF accessibility. The biggest thing to remember is that if it is not built accessibly, a PDF is an image and will not be readable via a screen reader. And then you will see a slide of some resources. And I know that that was very, very quick. So do we have any questions, any thoughts that we'd like to talk through?
We invite you to take yourself off of mute if you have questions at this point and share those questions with us. And Mary and Sarah, thank you both so much for this. I know I, for one, was making lots of notes as we were going along of things that I want to follow up on and dig a little deeper into. So I know this will be a great resource that we go back to time and time again. So I want to take full advantage of the time that we have left with Mary and Sarah. So again, if you have questions, please take yourself off of mute and share them.
And also at this point, feel free to use the chat if you are more comfortable, because at this point, I am readily able to read the chat and access those questions.
I'm going to go to our contact again. I know that y'all will, while folks are deciding if they have a question or not. Our contact information, we're available anytime. Reach out and let us know. If we covered something that you later think about and go, that didn't make sense, or I'd like to know more about that, or you're missing a resource for something that we talked about, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. That's what the Able Access team is here to do, is really, again, be a resource. And if we don't know the answers, we'll find the answers for you. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
No
while
questions?
we'll give folks a minute or two to be thinking about things, 2 questions that
Sure.
I wanted to pose to you all. Pretty much all the groups on this program are nonprofit organizations, various sizes, some large, some small. So particularly if a smaller organization is looking at this information and saying, this is great, we really want to do a better job of making our communications more accessible. but as a small group, we don't really know where to start. What resources would you all recommend, or what resources, I'll tee this up for you, might able South Carolina even have to help fellow nonprofit organizations around the state?
Yeah, that's a great question, Daniel. Thank you. And that's something that we've actually been talking about internally is sometimes the cost of a website audit, for example, can be fairly expensive. And we are looking at some ways to help smaller nonprofits offset that cost. We do have a contract with the South Carolina Arts Commission, for example, so any arts organizations that might be involved, they also do have some funding available to help with that. But reach out to us. We will do our best. A lot of times we will, for example, have a nonprofit that is doing something that we don't know much about. So could we trade some professional development? Can we figure out how to do an in-kind opportunity where you teach us something and we teach you something? Can we be a resource that way? So we don't ever want accessibility to be a barrier to an organization. So we'll figure out a way to try to help you get your needs met and get some resources to you.
Awesome.
And then the other piece of that is some of these things that we talked about today are extremely easy to implement. Adding headings into your documents, naming your links correctly using meaningful link text, avoiding things like click here, learn more, making sure all of your social media has good alt text, and then just not using PDFs if you don't know if they're created accessibly. So just some very simple things that can make all the difference.
Yes, Sarah, and that's something we really just we weren't able to get into today. I did see that Abby mentioned revamping your website, excited to put this info into use. One thing we certainly can do for folks, if you are about to redo a website, if you're working with a web developer or you're doing it internally, give us a buzz. We'd love to do, even if it's just a quick consultation with you, some things to think about. We did not put in here the, perhaps I shouldn't say danger, Sarah, but the potential problems of using an accessibility overlay. You may have seen an accessibility overlay. It's a little, typically little circle, bottom right, bottom left. Sometimes it's the international symbol of accessibility, the wheelchair symbol. Sometimes it's just a little person. Those do not in and of themselves provide accessibility. In a lot of ways, they break accessibility, they make things harder. So be very mindful of that. There is no quick fix for making a website accessible. There's just not. It's one of those things where if it sounds too good to be true, it is. One layer of front end code is not going to fix all the things that there are thousands of pages of WCAG standards to address. So be very mindful of that. And there are some, if you're using WordPress, for example, there are some WordPress templates that have accessibility features built in. So there are ways to do that in-house. I spent 10 years in a very small nonprofit. We built everything ourselves, and there are ways to do it. We'd be happy to help you.
Fantastic. And then second question from me, and again, we want to make sure that other folks can ask as well. You're among friends here. We all are sharing the same values and sharing the same desire to improve accessibility and to make accessibility a pillar of our focus. But we sometimes encounter or interact with vendors or with companies or with others that maybe don't have those same priorities and values. So what are some strategies that you all might have found useful when you encounter a lack of accessibility and a lack of willingness to seek to accommodate basic accessibility requests? How would you encourage folks to navigate those situations, besides just citing the legal statutes that you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation?
I think oftentimes what we encounter more than an unwillingness is, excuse me, is a lack of knowledge. Folks who don't know what they don't know. For instance, citing what Mary was saying about the overlay, where you encounter folks that absolutely have been convinced that they are doing exactly what they need to do. And it's a little heartbreaking to have that conversation of, we appreciate you, but that's not quite it. And so I think really just being mindful of, you don't know where people are coming from. You don't know what people think they know. Go gently, explain things piece by piece, explain why accessibility is the way it is. If you are met with genuine unwillingness, cite the legal statutes, cite the market share that people are missing out on by making their content inaccessible. Make it about return on investment is the biggest thing that I have learned over the years.
And I think I'll add to that that one of the biggest things that we often see in discussions of accessibility is folks feel like it is hard to do, costs a lot of money, and is really only going to benefit a small group of people. Well, I'll refer back to 1 in 3 South Carolinians has a disability, but accessibility makes things easier for everyone. There is not an accessibility component you can tell me about that makes life more difficult for non-disabled folks. It literally makes life better and easier for everybody. And a lot of times when I talk to people and I talk about how easy it can be, how no one's, trying to force you. It's an easy, most of the time, very affordable thing to do that benefits everybody you're engaging with, and helping folks kind of identify those perceived barriers to difficulty. That's the best way. I always assume best intentions. I want to know, so what might be the barrier, and I'm engaging in that conversation. What might be the barrier to doing this? How can I help you remove that? Again, my goal is removing all barriers. And sometimes that's to the broader community and figuring out how to make everything they do accessible. Because I think that's really everybody wants to. They just don't always know how.
Awesome. That's very helpful.
So, right.
Any
Well,
last minute closing questions for our guests? All right,
we are
Mary and
available if
Sarah.
anybody thinks of anything. We're around.
Yeah, thank you
Absolutely.
both. Thank you both so much.
You.
Absolutely. Thank y'all.
Thank
Yeah,
you
we
so
appreciate it. All right, take care.
much. Bye-bye.
Thank y'all. All right, well, we're excited. We'll make the recording of that available, and I'm sure this will be one that we go back to frequently for additional insights. And I can already think of a few people that want to share this with as well. So moving to the next item on our agenda this morning, I'm very excited to share with you the finalized and now publicly accessible and available Palmetto Vision Alliance website. I hope you all have seen this recently and have had the opportunity to explore this site. This is, like all websites, a work in progress and something that we'll continue refining and improving over time. But we really want to help promote this. We really want to encourage folks to get to this site and to see it. We're going to keep it up to date as we move forward. So I wanted to talk about some plans for ongoing visibility and promotion within our organizations. I believe I sent this out in the email for today's meeting, but I will resend it as well. Our friends at 37 Gears created a e-badge for the Palmetto Vision Alliance, which is displayed on the screen. It's a circle with the Palmetto Vision Alliance logo in the middle of it, with the bands of the Palmetto Vision Alliance brand colors on the outer edges, and the words proud member at the bottom of the circle. So this would be an opportunity for all of us to put this on our website and to showcase that we're members of the Palmetto Vision Alliance, to link that badge to the Palmetto Vision Alliance website, and to help increase visibility of the program. So we hope that you all will take advantage of that and proudly promote your membership. But I would really encourage you all individually to weave this into your communication plans. We've been promoting it a little bit through Lions Vision Services, through our social media and through our emails that we send out, and are continuing to do so. And we hope that you all will take the opportunity to do that as well. Does anybody have specific suggestions for how we could increase visibility around this, or other public relations steps we could take?
Not really.
All right. One thing that I really encourage you to start exploring is the search feature. I think this is a part of the website that we will continue refining to continue improving its usefulness. I want to ask if you all would be supportive or if you think that it may even not be necessary to add right now the search is by zip code and then by service type. The service type are the list of services that we all provide. And that's really it. It then generates the list based on location of the members that offer those services. But there are a couple of those services, particularly with eye surgeries and with low vision equipment, where additional search criteria we thought might be helpful so that we might add tags to those. So if you were to select low vision, excuse me, I'll use eye surgeries. If you were to select eye surgeries, then a separate tags feature would pop up where you could select cataracts or retina, something that would further refine that search. Or if you went with low vision equipment, things like, you could select magnifiers or CCTVs or things like that. Would adding those tags, particularly to those two features of eye surgeries and low vision equipment, would that be worth pursuing, do you think? You can also put that in the chat as well if you'd prefer to share feedback through the chat.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button for some reason. I think with surgeries, I would say not so much, but with low vision equipment, I know I talk to a lot of people and they don't really know what that means. So if they're looking for a magnifier, they may or may not know that you're referring to low vision equipment as kind of an umbrella. That's just my experience with talking to people when they're calling looking for different services.
So maybe tags should be another field regardless, with just all the tags that are available. And so somebody could search through the tags and say, I'm looking for a magnifier, and then it would auto-populate the low vision equipment field, kind of working in reverse order then.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess with the surgeries too, because I don't think everybody offers all the same types of surgery. So wouldn't that narrow down?
Well, it would, and that's the other thought process. If somebody's looking for a specialty surgery like a cornea cross-linking, there are only going to be a couple of entities that could provide that service. So that would help. I think surgeries probably flow more logically. If somebody's looking for a cornea cross-linking surgery, they probably know that they're looking for an eye surgery.
Yeah.
But that would just further help connect the individual with the entities that could be the most helpful to them. Other thoughts on adding the tags feature? Alrighty. Moving on to the new business item, we want to talk quickly about our schedule. We sent out a note or a survey on both meeting dates for this year as well as topics for this year. And I'll be honest, we got 0 responses from that quick survey. So I'm assuming, just based on attendance, particularly at the top of the hour, that these are topics that you all are interested in. But the proposed topics were accessible marketing and communications, a public policy update on accessible transportation, reaching rural communities, and funding and fundraising for disability services. That last one, funding and fundraising for disability services, we have a particular foundation funder in mind as a speaker for that. And so we thought that could be another connection with one of our foundations in South Carolina that would be supportive of our communities. We also just had the second phase of South Carolina's big data report that looks at the county level prevalence of blindness and vision loss in South Carolina, as well as looking at other quality of life factors with that. So we have that we would like to do a deep dive on as well before the end of this year. So that would actually increase the number of meetings that we would have. Are those topics that you all would be interested in? Should we add a meeting for the big data project and just hear the data presentation from that? Maybe not a full regular Palmetto Vision Alliance meeting. What are your thoughts on the meeting topics that have been proposed?
Hi, Daniel. This is Darlene Graham. I would be interested in a presentation on that.
On the big data?
Yes, yes.
Okay, excellent. Any other feedback on the topics or the meeting schedule that was proposed? Okay, I see in the chat, Shifa Clinic is also interested in the big data project. Would you all be interested in that being its own kind of standalone thing, separate from our quarterly meetings?
Either way, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Very good. All righty. We will wind things down. Please continue to share feedback throughout the year on that. We generate these topics as well as speakers based on interest that's shown in meetings and based on specific requests from members. We want these to be things that are relevant to us and adding value to the work that we're doing. So please continue to share feedback on those. Are there any other discussion points, any updates or events that you all would like to share? I received 2 updates by email that I want to make sure we put in front of everyone, and these will be in the follow-up materials as well. The South Carolina Assistive Technology Program is hosting the 2024 Assistive Technology Expo. That's going to be on March 12th, 2024. Exhibits open at 8:30 a.m. and close at 3:30 p.m. There will be information and continuing education sessions beginning at 9:30 a.m. There will be contact information in that flyer, but this will be held at the Columbia Metropolitan Convention Center. And we certainly hope that you will join us in attending that and potentially even being an exhibitor with that. And then the Foundation Fighting Blindness is hosting a vision seminar. This will be on Saturday, February 24th at Stone River, which is in West Columbia. It will begin with a 9 a.m. registration and breakfast, followed by a program from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Again, this is hosted by Foundation Fighting Blindness and their vision seminar. There will be information with the latest info on age-related macular degeneration from a panel of speakers across the landscape of retinal health. And then the Santee blind fishing event that is managed by Lions Vision Services, its registration is now open. The dates for that event are April 26th and 27th, 2024. We have a limited number of spots, so we encourage people to sign up soon. That registration form is on our website at lionsvisionservices.org, and we'll include that in the follow-up materials as well. Registration deadline, correct me if I'm wrong, it's in early March. I think March 14th is the final deadline for attendees, and volunteers can register a little bit longer into early April. I think it's April the 8th. We hope you will join us for that. Are there any other announcements that you all would like to share? Please drop them in the chat or put them on mute, or take yourself off of mute and share them with the group. All right, well, hearing none, feel free to send any other updates in by email. We will get an email out within the next week or so with the recording and materials from today's program, as well as these updates. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, May the 8th at 9 a.m. We encourage you to access all of these resources and materials using our Palmetto Vision Alliance OneDrive folder. And please keep in touch until we see you again in May. Thank you all for your time this morning. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.